All right, Titans, I'm back with some help on your Khan Academy that's due this Friday. I picked a couple of the problems that I thought you might have the most questions on, so hopefully this will help you get through those. And once you get one of them down, you'll understand what to do on the rest. You already know how to do all this, just sometimes the directions can be a little tricky. And anyway, so the first one is the polynomials intro. This goes through a lot of vocabulary with polynomials. This problem here says pick the expression that's a third degree binomial. So the degree is the largest exponent. So if it was 4x squared plus 2x, the largest exponent would be 2. That's a second degree polynomial. If your largest exponent maybe is a 10, then this would be a 10th degree polynomial. There's also something called standard form, which is going to come up on a lot of these problems. Standard form is when you have your largest exponent first, and then the exponents get smaller as you go left to right. So on this one is in standard form because x squared is a larger exponent than x to the first. But this one would not be in standard form because to put it in standard form, we'd want to move the largest exponent to the front, so 9x to the 10th, and then put the 5x to the 7th after it because it has a smaller exponent. This particular problem didn't ask about that, but you will come to some problems that ask about standard form. So again, your largest exponent first, then your smaller, and then if you have a constant, so just a number by itself like 5, that always goes last. So back to this problem, third degree. So I'm looking for something to the third power. This one's to the 8th power. That one's to the third power, third power, third power. So A, C, and D are all third degree. But then it says binomial, right? And we talked about bi meaning 2. So binomial means there's only going to be 2 terms. So I can eliminate this because that's a trinomial, 3 terms. I can eliminate D as well because it is also a trinomial. So this is my only possible answer that still works. But the last part does say a constant term of 8. Constant term means the number that doesn't have a variable. So this one here actually had a constant term of 8 as well, but we couldn't pick this one because it was a trinomial instead of a binomial. But we end up with negative 5x to the third plus 8 being our solution or our answer for this one because it's third degree, constant term of 8, and it's a binomial because it only has 2 terms. Let's try another one of those. This one says, what is the degree of the polynomial? If I zoom in here a little bit, it has 4m squared, negative 3m to the 6th, and positive 5m to the 4th. And the degree, again, is the largest exponent. So I'm not going to go to the coefficient. That's different. I'm going to go to the exponents, and my largest exponent was 6. So the degree of this polynomial would be a 6th degree polynomial. Just type in the number 6. All right, on to multiplying binomials using an area model. So this might look a little bit different, but it's really just the same thing we were doing in class with the box. So to get this first box here, I'm going to do x times x, which is x squared. This one's going to be x times 4, which is 4x. This one is 5 times x, which is 5x. And then finally, my last box is 5 times 4, which is 20. So if I combine like terms, I get x squared. Add those together to get positive 9x. And then we have plus 20. So that is your area of your box, also known as if you multiply the 2 polynomials together, it's what you get. So to type that in, you go down to where it says area, and you type in x squared plus 9x plus 20. The next type is the area box without the area box. So this is the way we did it in class. We have a binomial times a binomial, and we taught that we're going to do that using a box. So we got negative 5d plus 8. I'm going to make my box d minus 3. And and then I figure out what goes in the box. So I need to multiply these together. Negative 5d times positive 5d is a negative 5d squared. And then positive 8 times positive d is positive 8d. Negative 5d times negative 3, negative times negative is positive 15d. And then 8 times negative 3 is negative 24. So when I combine all my like terms, I end up getting negative 5d squared. Combine those to get plus 23d. And then finally, my constant minus 24. So you type all that into the box, and you've got it. The next one is solving quadratics by taking square roots. And the part that throws most students off is this smaller x and larger x, so I'm going to go over that. But again, our goal is to solve this. And so since we're finding the zeros, that just means we're going to plug in 0 for the h of x. So I'm going to do 0 equals negative 6x squared plus 384. And when we solve by taking the square root, we know we need to get the x squared alone. So before I take the square root, I need to get rid of the 384. I'm going to subtract that from both sides. Negative 384 equals negative 6x squared. And then to get rid of this negative 6, I'm not going to add 6 because this is actually getting multiplied. So to undo multiplication, I'm going to divide, which gives me x squared equals negative divided by negative is a positive. And I would love to impress you with my mental math, but I don't want to get it wrong, so I'm going to pull out my handy dandy calculator. 384 divided by 6 is 64. So I get 64 equals x squared. This is the point where we want to take the square root. And when we take the square root, we get two solutions, right? We get the positive and the negative. And the square root of 64 is 8. So we get positive 8 and negative 8. So when I think about those two numbers, negative 8 and positive 8, the smaller one is going to be whichever one is further left on the number line. So negative 8 is a smaller number than positive 8. So I'm going to plug negative 8 as my smaller x value. And then positive 8, since that's a bigger number than negative 8, that will be my larger x. So my smaller x is negative 8. My larger x is positive 8. All right, the last con I wanted to review with you, and then if you have other questions, we'll be doing our Zoom meetings. I'll be sending out links to you from 1 to 2 p.m. You can click on the link and we'll be able to video conference and you can ask specific questions and I'll have my whiteboard and I can draw problems out. Hopefully we can figure out how to use it. I've never done it, but we're going to make it work. All right, this last one is creating a list of steps that would solve the problem. So if I was going to solve this problem, which I'll write it out over here. My first thing I have to do is I have to get the part that's squared, which is this parentheses, that's what has the squared on it. I need to get this part alone. So my first step would be to subtract 4 from both sides. So I'm going to go over to my list of steps, and the first step we did was subtract 4 from both sides. So I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides. That was step number 1. Then, before we take the square root, we need to get rid of the 5, because the 5 is not being squared. So we're going to divide both sides by 5. X minus 3 squared equals 25. So we divided both sides by 5. That was step number 2. Boom. Step number 3, now that we have the part that's squared by itself, pick a different color, I can take the square root of both sides. So, not squaring both sides, that's different. I need to scroll down a little bit. We're taking the square root. Squaring is when you put the little 2 on top and you multiply it by itself. Taking the square root is when we actually take the square root. So don't get those mixed up. So my next step was to take the square root of both sides, which if we do that, we get x minus 3 equals plus or minus 5, because we have to make sure we put the plus minus. And then finally, my last step to get the x by itself is going to be to add 3 to both sides, which will give me x equals 3 plus or minus 5, which we know that means 3 plus 5, so we get a final solution of 8. But we can also do 3 minus 5, which will give us negative 2, so we end up with those two solutions. But going along with my steps, we took the square root to get to here, and then we added 3 to both sides. So my next step was add 3 to both sides. Once we did that, we were done. I don't think it says simplify on here, so we don't need to put that on, and nailed it. Bam. All right, good luck with your Khan Academy. Email me, send me a message on Remind, or meet me on Zoom, and I can help you with anything else you need help on. Talk to you later, Titans.